Good evening. Can you hear me? Good, okay. This is a fabulous crowd. I think Southern Shores may have won. You think? Yeah? Anyhow, thanks for coming. Welcome to the 2017 Southern Shores Municipal Voter Forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dare County. Now, the League is a nonprofit organization which, first, encourages informed and active participation in government, works to increase understanding of major public policy issues, and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Now, the League maintains a strict, nonpartisan policy. It neither endorses nor opposes any political party or candidate. My name is Judy Lotus. I'm with the Dare County League, and I live right next door in Duck. The League participates in the Positive Campaign Project and has requested that each candidate take the Code of Campaign Ethics Pledge. Did you all do that? Yes. We prohibit campaigning and or campaign literature in this room. Cell phones, electronic devices, please turn off right now because there's no texting, no phones, etc. Now, the League members participating today are the greeters who greeted you as you came in, Linda Burek, Carol Butcher, Yvonne Diker, and reviewing questions tonight over here are Nancy Biradelli and Nancy Dondrade. Did I say that right? Okay. And Marion Midget. Our timekeeper is Linda Burek. There she is right there. We encourage a lively discussion, and I'm told that in Southern Shores that's no problem. But if you think of a question during the forum, please raise your hand and one of our staff will hand you a card. Now, we thank our candidates for being here tonight. Tom Bennett, candidate for mayor of Southern Shores. Gary McDonald, candidate for mayor of Southern Shores. Jim Connors, candidate for town council, and Jerry Sullivan, candidate for town council. The format for the forum. Each candidate will have 3 minutes for an introductory statement. The timekeeper will signal when the candidate has 30 seconds remaining. The timekeeper will stand up if the candidate just continues talking. Next, candidates will respond to questions from the audience. Voters are asked to submit written questions. Please write them legibly so they can be read and sign them with your town of residence. League members will review questions over here for subject matter, clarity, relevance, and to avoid repetition. Questioners will be asked to step to the podium and read their questions as written without further comment, no editorializing. The questioner will then be seated and the moderator will continue to preside. Now, the League advocates positive campaign practices, and we reserve the right to omit any question that is viewed as a personal attack or unrelated to campaign issues. Your questions can be addressed to a specific candidate or candidates, or to all of them. 2 minutes allowed for responses. Again, the timer will signal the candidate when 30 seconds remains and stand if the candidate goes over the time allotted. Opportunities will not be extended to those who initially pass on a question. Finally, each candidate is entitled to a 2-minute closing statement. Now, before we started, candidates drew numbers to establish the order for opening statements. We'll reverse this order for the closing statements. We begin with the opening statement from the candidates based on the numbers drawn. First, Jim Connors.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jim Connors, and I'd like to first thank the League of Women Voters for conducting this forum, but then I'd also like to thank everybody present. It's great to see such a good crowd here. My wife, daughter, and I moved to the Outer Banks in 1995. We built a home on Duckwoods Drive, and almost from that time forward, from when we finished, I've been involved in volunteerism with the Southern Shore Civic Association and on the Town Capital Improvements Committee. I volunteered with All Saints Episcopal Church and many other areas, and that volunteerism still continues to this day. These volunteer efforts, working together with others, have resulted in improvements to existing park facilities like the Sea Oats Community Park and also the Trinity Park, but also working together with others, we've been able to build new facilities like the Loblolly Marina and the Hillcrest Tennis Courts. I think that my professional work would allow me to offer some expertise in such areas as stormwater management, urban forestry, planning and zoning issues, and low-impact development. I believe the most valuable asset, however, is my long history of working together with people to get things done. It's very rare that one individual can accomplish things all by themselves. Now, there are exceptions to that, but that's the vision I would like. That vision I have for the town of Southern Shores is also, I would like to carry on and forward the work of our town staff in maintaining the low tax rate, the infrastructure improvements, and sound financial and professional management of our town. I envision development of a long-range plan for our town, looking beyond the horizon a little bit so that we can anticipate the expenditures associated with the capital improvements just so that we can anticipate and plan for things. I think that we all have many visions, but my all-encompassing vision for Southern Shores is working together to get things done. At the end of the day, we're all neighbors in this town, and we're all blessed to be here. We enjoy this town, and I think that by working together, we can realize these visions, these shared visions that we have. I've got 30 seconds, but that's a good closing right there. Thank you.
Next, we'll hear from Gary McDonald.
Ready? Good evening. I'm Councilman Gary McDonald, and here's why I'm running for mayor of Southern Shores. Southern Shores finds itself at a critical point in maintaining its character as a quiet, resident-friendly community. As the Outer Banks grows, so will the challenges that face our town. In the past, our town has met these challenges using our undesignated fund balance, which was designed to handle emergencies, not to fund projects. With the needs we are facing now and those that will come in the near future, our town can no longer count on meeting those challenges piecemeal. Like any successful organization, we need to anticipate challenges. We need to determine where we want to be next year, 5 years from now, and we need to develop a path to get there. We do this by establishing a clear community vision and using that to drive and develop a long-range plan. Then together with our vision and our long-range plan and our budget, we tie that together so that we can make smart, cost-efficient decisions. That's the formula we'll need if we want to keep this town moving in the direction it's been and protect our future. Also, when I ran for council in 2015, I did so on a platform of increasing citizen input and open government. I've had a few successes. I helped convince the council to hold a successful town hall meeting on beach nourishment, providing citizens with information from experts on both the pros and the cons of beach nourishment, and allowing citizens to give us input. Our mayor wanted to rush ahead with the beach nourishment without providing any information to council to make a decision or a plan to implement that. During my time on council, he also voted to eliminate 4 standing council committees with citizen representation. These committees discussed the issues and brought recommendations back to the council. I helped persuade the council to reestablish our Capital Improvement Committee, an avenue for our citizens to give us input. I'm still committed to that avenue of advancing the citizen government concept. Southern Shores was founded on volunteerism. This is what drove our town back when we were in the early years. We need to bring that citizen involvement back. When citizens elect us to office, they're making us temporary stewards of our town. It makes no sense that we ignore or limit their voices on issues. Our citizens have invested their future to this town, and I'm prepared to safeguard that investment. We need a change in direction, and we need more decisive leadership. And that's why I'm running for mayor. And thank you to the league and everyone for being here.
Tom Bennett.
Good evening. I want to thank the league also for sponsoring this forum, and I want to thank those here for coming out tonight. My vision for our town is relatively simple. That is to stay the course. I believe we should continue to spend our taxpayer dollars wisely, to remain debt-free, to do our absolute best not to increase taxes while still providing the essential services we've all come to expect. Protecting and preserving the unique character of our community is essential. I believe we've been able to do that very effectively while rebuilding all or a portion of 13 of our streets, replacing the Tall Pine Bridge, addressing a major stormwater remediation project at East Dogwood and Highway 12, installing new solar crosswalk lighting, and moving forward with a modest beach nourishment project. I believe our town has made a major commitment not only to provide essential services, but also to invest in our community in ways that continue to protect our property values, our public safety, and our quality of life. We completed several, to summarize briefly, we completed several significant capital improvement projects in the past 4 years. We retired remaining town debt and are debt-free, a rare occurrence for most municipalities. We maintain the lowest tax rate on the entire Outer Banks. We maintain a substantial undesignated fund balance to handle emergencies, and our town is in excellent financial condition. Our annual audits have consistently shown this. This has all been accomplished with no tax increase during my term. These things don't just happen. Under my leadership and with the help of our competent professional staff and members of council, we have been using a funded capital improvement plan with citizen input to determine the priority for improvements needed in our town. This plan is implemented through our annual budgeting process. The scope of this plan has recently been expanded to address not only our streets, but other elements of our infrastructure as well. And the citizen participation has also been significantly increased on this committee. I look forward to the coming question and answer session, and I thank you for your time.
And now Jerry Sullivan.
Thank you all for coming and giving me a chance to share with you what I would like for our town. And thanks to the DARE League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. My name is Jerry Sullivan, and I'm running for a seat on the Southern Shores Town Council. Many of you know me for my involvement and advocacy in the community. I was a co-founder and served on the board of Build the Bridge, Preserve Our Roads, the Civic Association Board, the Tennis Club Board, and the DARE League of Women Voters. I decided to run for council because I care about our town, its character, its natural beauty, and most importantly, all of you. I want to make sure that in carrying out projects, our council does a better job in making sure that we don't unnecessarily drive up taxes or destroy the town's ambience and natural beauty. Southern Shores, like other towns on the Outer Banks, is facing increased pressure from development to aging infrastructure. Yet the present council has balked at putting together a master plan and doing long-term budget forecasting. We can no longer tackle projects on an ad hoc basis, funding them out of our emergency reserves, which are there primarily to take care of things like hurricanes. I want our council to be more proactive in addressing the issues important to the community. So my first priority will be making sure the council develops a master plan that will lead to more forward thinking and better decision-making. I will use my executive experience in finance and accounting to help put together a long-term budget forecast that will lay out all the projects, expenses, revenues, and forecast changes in our tax rates, covering a 5 to 10-year period. My goal will be to minimize any tax impact by making sure we fund only necessary projects and continuously look for opportunities to reduce cost and increase our revenues. And I want to make sure that any plan the council develops reflect the community by providing opportunities for you to have input in the decision-making process along the way and making sure the council truly listens to you. After all, this is your town, and the money we spend are your tax dollars. Thank you.
Okay, and now we'll have questions from the audience. I'll call two people to the podium area for the first and second question, then one after that, so you'll be ready to ask your question. I've also been asked to ask you not to clap, because once we start, we'll never stop.
Before you ask the first question, can you, there's some seats up here for folks that are standing if y'all want to sit down.
Charlie O'Shields and Greg Testa.
Do we have the same question?
No, this is yours.
I would like to see a show of hands of those candidates who are for restricting traffic on Dogwood Trail by prohibiting right turns off of Route 58 during the summer weekends. A show of hands, please.
You mean left turns, I think.
Yeah.
You mean left turn?
Yeah.
This is the left, isn't it? All these years. Show of hands, please. Thank you.
Will Mary Ellen Holland come here next?
Good evening. This question is for all candidates. The town recently completed a section of beach nourishment for Pelican Watch. I'd like to know where all the candidates stand on the Pelican Watch project and beach nourishment for the entire town. Thanks.
All right, let's start with Jerry Sullivan.
Okay. Yes, we recently completed a section of beach nourishment for Pelican Watch, and that was largely due to the residents, not the residents, but the property owners coming forward and requesting beach nourishment there and willing to put up some of the money to pay for it. But I don't consider the Pelican Watch project by a referendum on where we go in the future. Beach nourishment is an expensive proposition, and once you get into it, you're in it forever. We're talking about $5 million, approximately a mile, and then you have to re-nourish about every 5 years at a cost of 30% to 60%. That's what the consultant told us. This decision is too important for just the council to make, and that's why I think that all of the residents and property owners ought to have input into that decision. We're going to be in the process of updating the Campbell Land Use Plan. I want to make sure that that's one of the items that's considered in the plan, and that we survey all the residents and property owners, because in the long term, we all are going to be paying for it, so we need to see what we all want. Thank you.
Gary McDonald.
Beach nourishment. We have to maintain our beaches. Our council moved to nourish the area in front of Pelican Watch. We were very fortunate to be able to do that. We have no plan in place, which is the issue for us as a town right now as far as beach nourishment. And I'll give you my understanding was that Kitty Hawk and Kill Devil Hills and Duck both went through the process of permitting. We were very fortunate at Southern Shores in that we were able to tag on to the end of Kitty Hawk's permitting process. Only took us about 4 months to get those permits in place, where Kitty Hawk and Kill Devil Hills and Duck had worked on those permitting process for over 2 years, and putting in place the funding that you need in order to do beach nourishment. If our town needs that, I would work to do that, but we need a plan to get there. It's a very expensive process. The gentleman who was the engineer on our project told us that to nourish our entire beach would be somewhere over $25 million for Southern Shores. That's an expensive undertaking. That was one of the things I was talking about when I said we have things coming on board in the future. So doing those things, we would need to have a plan in place, and that would be something to be inclusive in our capital improvement plan, and have a structure in place. We would also need to work hand in hand with the county, because they have matching funds that we can draw from, which would reduce the cost to the town of Southern Shores. Thank you.
Jim Connors.
Generally speaking and philosophically, I'm not for beach renourishment, but I think that the Pelican Watch was a unique situation, and there was, as Mr. McDonald pointed out, a confluence of things that made it palatable for us to look at that. That is, that our sister communities were already proceeding and we could tag on. Now, what happened with ours is that the oceanfront owners kicked in about $150,000 toward this. The county revenues will equate to about $500,000, which left an approximate bill for the town of $350,000, about a third of the total overall cost. Now, what I would like to see our town do is adopt a more proactive beach dune maintenance program. And I have outlined a program like that on my Facebook page, but it basically entails maintaining those dunes on a year-to-year basis. Even if they're not threatened, we can still fortify them. I've worked on some dunes up in the Sanderling area of Duck where we've done that, and you know, the stronger you can make those dunes, the better. So why wait until there's a problem? Let's keep doing it on a year-to-year basis. Thank you.
And Tom Bennett.
Thank you. I was pretty actively involved in this project in conversations with the property owners. It's been called the Pelican Watch Project. It really extended far beyond Pelican Watch. We did almost half a mile of our beachfront, not just the area right in front of Pelican Watch. There were 27 properties involved. As you've heard tonight, the property owners there agreed to contribute to the project. An amount we asked them to contribute. We did it through an assessment, and they can pay that assessment back over a 5-year time frame, which didn't saddle them. As you heard tonight, we had a matching fund from the county to pay half the cost of the project, not to exceed $1 million, and they're going to do that or have done that. We were very fortunate because we were able to tie into the existing projects in Kill Devil Hills, Duck, and Kitty Hawk. Those projects had been delayed for a year, or we wouldn't have been able to tie in. We were just lucky that fell into place the way it did. I'm not philosophically opposed to beach nourishment. I feel it's in an ocean community like we are, you have to accept the fact that the sand is not permanent. And how you address that is going to be something the individual towns and the citizens of those towns have to decide. You can do the Virginia Beach route where you pile sand forever and push it around forever, or you can do like some of the more southern coastal towns have done where they do it not quite often enough. My overall comment about this particular project was it was worthwhile. We had 27 properties involved, as I said, and those properties generate a significant amount of tax revenue for our town every year. Thank you.
Okay, before our next question, could I ask Tommy Carroll to come up and be ready?
Good evening. Gary, this question is for you. Describe your relationship with the town staff these last 2 years, and how do you expect to work with them if you do become mayor?
I have a working relationship with the town staff. If you are, I don't know what you're asking as far as working with them. I worked with them for the last 2 years on projects throughout my term on council. I ask a lot of questions, which I want to get the information before I make a decision on things. So I question staff about different things and ask for budget and ask for input on all the projects that we're doing. I sometimes have to ask more than I would like to as far as to get the information, but I have a fairly good working relationship with staff. And usually we have two-way communication back and forth.
Tom, would you like to answer the question as well?
That particular question? Absolutely, I'd be glad to answer that question. I'm going to approach it from a little bit different angle. I had my own business for over 30 years. I communicated daily with my foreman, my crew leaders, my team leaders. You can't manage or set policy effectively if you aren't working with the people that work for you. It's just impossible. I meet with our town manager oftentimes 3 times a week, 15, 20 minutes, just to be kept current of what he's dealing with as far as trying to manage our town, which is his job. Council's job is to set policy, and the manager's job is to implement that policy. I don't think, as the mayor, I could function effectively without my relationship with our town manager and our town staff. Our finance officer, our planner, these people all contribute to what my thought process is and where I am as far as what I know about what's happening in our community. I think it's absolutely critical. I think you can't function as a council person or as the mayor unless you have that dialogue and that rapport and that relationship with your staff. I think I've tried to maintain that for the full time I've been in this office, which is almost 4 years. Thank you.
Sam Williams, would you like to come up and ask a question?
Tommy Carroll, Southern Shores. Mayor Bennett, you are on record as saying you thought we were getting along pretty well without a long-range plan and without doing budget forecasting. You canceled the strategic planning retreat for this year, and you moved to eliminate council standing committees, including planning and finance. Like you, I know you're retired, I own my own business. I have a budget, a very small budget, about 100 times less than the town's budget of $5.2 million. How do you defend your current approach of not wanting to plan for our future? And I'd like to hear what the other candidates have to say on that topic also.
Thank you. Not planning for our future is not a very correct statement. I think you plan for your future with a plan and a budget to support it, and we do that. Every year at our budget planning conference, the council sits there and discusses among themselves and with our management team what our costs are going to be for the following year. And we prioritize our budget and prioritize those items on that budget at that time. Are we looking out 10 years down the road? Not really. Are we looking out 2 and 3 years down the road? Absolutely. And I'll go into that further a little later on, but We do plan, and we do have a budget objective in mind. And most of that planning, frankly, is driven by your budget. We don't, we have a $5.5 million, almost $6 million budget, but most of our planning and most of the objectives we set for each year that we're going to try to accomplish are dictated by our budget, our income, and the money we have available to us. Did I miss some other part of your question I'd like to answer, if I may?
The strategic planning retreat that you canceled.
I don't know why that was. We probably had a pretty full plate with the canal, with the beach nourishment project on our plate and things like that. It was not a deliberate intention to cut the public short or anything like that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy.
I would also like the other candidates to answer that question if they're allowed to.
All right. Jim Connors.
As a private businessman and just about in every other aspect of life, I'm all for sitting down and developing a plan. I think, though, that any kind of plan that we do in town shouldn't really be looking out too much more beyond 5 years, though, because those things life is just too dynamic for us to be able to anticipate everything. Emergencies come up and everything. I also addressed part of this in my opening statement. I think that whatever plan we develop has got to be drawn from the people working on that plan has got to be drawn from a large cross-section of towns to make sure everybody's represented. I also think that, again, like I said in my opening statement, it's got to be a living, breathing document and be updated on a year-to-year basis. It's not a one-time thing, but I'm all for planning. I think it's nuts not to do that.
Jerry Sullivan.
I actually was in the meeting where Mayor Bennett said he thought we were getting along pretty well without a plan, and I got up and spoke out. I disagreed. What happens when you don't plan is that we tend to take up projects when anybody brings them to us. We're in a reactive mode and not a proactive mode. And that affects the quality of our decisions, and it also affects the cost. I also think we need to look out for a decade. A plan becomes a living document. But right now, if you look at our capital plan, for example, we've got $8 million in there for roads, $8 million. And at the rate we're going, that actually goes out 13 years. And by the way, we have not even touched any of the avenues or the beach roads. This is only a portion of our town. So I'd like to see us become more forward-thinking and do a better job of planning. If we want to minimize the impact on our taxes, we need to look at what we want to do, prioritize it, lay it out, forecast revenue, expenses, and tax rates, and we need to look at alternatives. And you get that done when you do good planning, both financial and strategic. Thank you.
Okay, Gary?
Long-range planning, let me state again, we can't make smart decisions about our future relying on short-term or ad hoc type decisions every day. One of my priorities is to take the outline that we have of the strategic plan. Council approved this nearly 2 years ago, and this was developed through citizen input. We need to use that to provide policy direction for our town as we consider different things such as land use, development, infrastructure improvement. That includes our roads, our buildings, our grounds, stormwater management, beach nourishment, our maritime forest preservation, and our police and our fire protection. I plan to use that comprehensive plan to carry out the guidance and goals offered in our town vision. Our long-range plan must identify the challenges to the goals that we want to achieve and the direction that we want to take, not only for our current needs, but for those needs that emerge in the future. And that's going to require some budget forecasting, which we're not doing right now, so we can prioritize our budget for what we need, our projected needs, and make good, smart decisions in the future. And that'll take us in the right direction.
Jim Groff.
Good evening, candidates. And this is a question for all of the candidates. If elected, specifically, what would you change? And when I say specifically, for example, I don't want to hear something like, I want to change the color on Town Hall. I'd rather hear something like, I want to paint Town Hall orange.
Jerry.
Okay. If elected, what would I change? Well, first of all, I would change our approach to how the council lays out and plans and forecast. And because we aren't doing a lot of it now. So I'm a big proponent of long-range financial and business planning. I also think we need to change the way we deal with our residents and property owners. Sometimes it doesn't look like the council is listening to us. They let us speak out in public forums, but at times they've actually gone against what they're hearing from the public. And I think we need to provide more opportunity for you to have input into the process along the way and not wait and just let you give your opinion at the end when we have a public hearing. So those are the three things I want to do. Thank you.
Tom, would you like to answer?
Sure. I would like to answer. I would base my answer on our track record. You're hearing that we're not planning very well, and we're not showing much foresight, and we're not budgeting properly, and we're not listening to our residents. But amazingly enough, we're getting things done. Amazingly enough, we're operating our town for the last 4 years with no debt, no tax increase, nothing to apologize for as far as how we're managing our dollars and our infrastructure improvements. That was mentioned earlier about our infrastructure. It's going to take 15 years to do all the work we have to do. It's going to take a lot longer than that. The streets are built, and then over a period of time, they tend to break down. If you stop maintaining your infrastructure for any reason, that's the end of your town. That's a very, very important element. So you can't set a time frame on that and say, oh, we got 15 years to do all this work, because it isn't going to happen that way. So realistically, I think we have to be more objective in how we analyze what we're doing and not be so quick to say, well, we're not doing it right because it's not what I want. I think as I said, I would not change a great deal. I think I'm looking at infrastructure improvements going on through my lifetime, I'm sure. We've tried to allocate something over $500,000, $500,000 a year to street improvements. Thank you, Linda. And I think we should stay that course. Now, we may be able to increase those dollars a bit if we can find ways not to spend money somewhere else. But we're always going to have pressure to allocate funds for something, whether it's a road improvement or whether it's beach nourishment or it's a fire station. And we have to decide how we're going to do them at the council level. Thank you.
Jim.
Sorry. One of the things I'd like to change is the length of our council meetings. I think the council meetings at times appear like some council members are showing up unprepared, and so they're starting to go over everything right there that they could have picked up if they had just come prepared and saved a lot of time. There's a few other factors that go on, but I think the end result is when we start having 3 and 4 hour meetings, we're actually driving people away out of here. Away from our town hall and public meetings is what I mean. One other thing that I would like to change is a little more proactive recruitment of a younger crowd. We got a lot of great tops and chrome domes in this room, and I think that if we could get some younger people, we could, get some more different perspectives. One other thing that I would like to change is a little more proactivity on major decisions. When major decisions need to be made, that we more proactively seek citizen input. You know, we've got various tools to do that. We've got Facebook pages, the town email. We can send out something on a Survey Monkey, or there's a lot of ways to try and seek out and get citizen input before we have to make these major decisions.
Gary?
I'd build the Mid-Currituck County Bridge, Sam. I think that's one of the things that we really need. Actually, no. I would speed up our roads projects. If there's one thing that you want me to point out that we need to do, our budget without the planning that we needed to do there has been flat in the past. I pushed really hard this year to increase those capital improvement funds, and we did that. But shortly after we did the budget, we designated those funds partially for beach nourishment, which took that away. We do have a long range of plans of roads that need to be repaired. And we have a lot of projects. The other thing I would like to look at right when we get in is how to improve and increase our fire service. That's going to be coming on board fairly quickly. There's a need there to replace or upgrade the fire station, and I think that needs to be given a very serious look. Thank you.
Mary Ellen Holland, could you come for your question?
Very quick question for each of you. And I'm Jim Groff, 15-year resident, Southern Shores, who was recently moved to Dogwood. Hence my question. Do you support widening South Dogwood Trail to a minimum width of 24 feet? Yes or no?
He wanted to know if you support
Gary?
widening Dogwood Trail. to
Yes or no?
24 feet.
No.
Tom?
I'm not sure about the width, excuse me, I'm not sure about the width, but I would support a reasonable widening of that street from a safety perspective. I say that only because I get so much feedback from residents of South Dogwood and the town about the danger of passing an oversized vehicle on South Dogwood Trail. Mailboxes, rear view mirrors, I've had at least 20 people over the last 4 years complain to me about the width of that street. Arbitrarily to go to 24 feet, I'd have to look at the impact it has on the properties adjacent to the street, but I think it wouldn't hurt to widen it to a reasonable width, say 20, 22 feet. Yes, I think it'd be, the other thing that would allow us to do, which is something else I've been asked about a lot, is to center stripe the road, which would help a little bit, especially at night.
So,
When your streets are below a certain width, you can't do that.
so your answer was yes.
My answer is yes, but not 24 feet. Somewhere between what it is now and 24 feet.
Okay, Jared?
18, you're only going 5 feet, 2.5 feet either side.
I sort of agree with Tom. I would say that we could widen the road, but I don't know that 24 feet is necessary. We ought to take a look at it and decide what it would require to be safety, to make it safe. One of the things by having narrow streets, by the way, is that cars tend to slow down because they can't drive as fast on the roads. And I think one of the ways we'll make that road safer is if we look at doing something to get the traffic off that road. And that would include putting a no left turn on Dogwood on the summer weekends.
Was that yes or no?
Widening the,
Jerry, was that yes or no?
I say, yeah,
Yes.
I would widen them. I'm
Okay.
not sure it would be 24
Okay,
feet.
that wasn't clear. Yes?
I think a minimum width for our roads here in town should be about 20 feet, minimum width. Low-impact development guidelines call for narrower streets, but that is in comparison with those urban streets that have up to 30-foot wide, two-lane roads. Most of our roads in town are between 18 and 20 feet now, and that's what they've been trying to maintain. Unless there's a safety reason to expand it to 24 feet, I would have to look at the individual circumstances. But in general, I would say no to 24, but I would say yes to 20 to 22. It's, again, sticking in line with the low-impact development guidelines and everything. But that question has also got to be taken in context with the safety issues of so many pedestrians. If we decide not to do a walkway down there, then I think we need to widen that road to 24 feet or, enough to accommodate pedestrians and cyclists there.
Yes or no is a tough question.
Well, I really can't say yes or no. It's going to be dependent
Okay.
upon so many
yeah.
circumstances.
Steve Hansen?
Gary and Jerry, what is your position on the fire department's needs for new facilities, and do you support the town to help fund it?
She asked it of both, Gary. Which one do you want to go first,
You
me?
go ahead.
Well, I've toured the fire station with Chief Limbacher, and it's obvious that there are some real issues with it. The biggest one probably being that because of the way it's situated on the lot, that it's subject to flooding, and that's not acceptable. I think we need to do something with the fire station, and of course, that requires funding, and typically that would come from the town. The big issue, and this is where we get into the whole planning thing again, is we probably could have foreseen this maybe about 5 years ago and started putting out a plan and looking at how we were going to go about funding it. The real challenge has been right now that we've got a lot of really expensive projects on the table, so we're going to have to decide, do we want to increase taxes, or can we lay them out in a plan and figure out how we're going to fund them and what the best way to do it is.
Gary?
Okay. I'm firmly in favor of helping our dedicated men and women of the fire that volunteer at the fire department to help them continue doing the outstanding job that they do for us. I've toured the existing station. I've talked with Chief and many of the firefighters. And I've watched them actually on the Wax Myrtle fire. I got there and watched them in action. They're a very great group of people, and we are very blessed to have them in our community. Taking on that financial responsibility of building a new station or even updating the existing one is going to be costly. Right now, I think the estimate's between somewhere around $5 million to construct a new station. And we still don't have the cost that's associated with tearing down the existing fire station and storing the equipment and where they would operate while the station was being built. And again, it's unfortunate that we didn't see this coming. We should have been planning for this because that station's been there since 1979 or 78, I think.
88.
88. I think the chief, he did a presentation the other night, and one of the things that he continually asked is if anybody'd like to volunteer, please contact him. So I'll do a little plug for him there. If you'd like to volunteer, please contact our chief. Thank you.
Tom, would you like to answer as well?
Yes, I would, thank you. A couple of things I'd like to say about this. The fire department our volunteer department, is a totally separate, independent company. They did not advise us of their needs for a new facility until this past year. Since they are a contractor to us, we would not normally meddle in their business affairs. It just wouldn't be appropriate, even though they provide an extremely important service. When we found out about that, we tried to find out what the cost would be and how it could be worked, how it could be managed. I haven't heard 5 million. I've heard between 3.5 and 4.5 million, but maybe it's up to 5 just in the last few weeks. We committed to dedicate dollars to the fire departments for support them in their design and documents to allow them to bid the project out for construction. The fire department would actually finance the structure themselves. We would be their guarantor. There'd be no money out of the town's pocket as part of the financing. The money would come out of our pocket to pay their additional cost to carry that loan for 10 years, 20 years, whatever it took to go get the project paid off. The rough estimates right now are in the neighborhood of $300,000 a year, more than we're paying them right now. We pay them $500,000 a year. We would add to that and pay them out of our existing town budget. We could make that work. It would be a burden, but we could do it. Give you one quick example. The Kitty Hawk Fire Department, with a non-volunteer staff, pays $1.5 million a year just for their employees' salaries and benefits. We are saving a bucket full of money by having a volunteer service, and a great one at that, as good a fire service as anywhere on the beach. I thank you. Thank you, Linda.
Jim, would you like to answer?
I was at the Civic Association General Membership meeting when Ed Limbacher gave an excellent presentation, and he asked how many people would be willing to volunteer, and about 5 or 6 people raised their hands. But last night when I stopped by the fire department at their open training session, none of them were there. So that's the frustration that he is having, and that is, in his opinion, truly, I can't speak for Ed, but for what my take is that the volunteer fire department in this town is not looking good for the future. So it goes right back to what I was saying about proactively trying to engage and recruit a younger crowd for these volunteer activities, especially a fire department. Now, as far as the costs and everything goes, the plans for that new facility is at the architects now. When we get those back, then we'll be able to get some harder numbers and everything else and determine which direction we're going to go. But until we get the plans back, we just don't know the answers to so many questions that we have right now.
Good answer, Jim.
Sherry Davenport, would you come up?
My name is Steve Hansen, and I live on North Dogwood Trail. My question to all of the candidates is, what is your position and why on the proposed multi-use path on South Dogwood Trail?
Jim, take that first.
Okay. I was on the Dogwood Trails Task Force where we recommended a 5-foot wide walkway that would meander amongst the trees and to minimize impact. I would be against a multi-use path anywhere in town except along NC 12 because a multi-use path is 8 to 10 to 12 feet wide. A 5-foot walkway is a different animal. I would be all for that kind of walkway down, especially South Dogwood, only because it's such a clear health, safety, welfare issue. I saw 2 girls run off their bicycles in July on that road. It was by the grace of God that those 2 girls missed the trees and the mailboxes. And if there was any doubt in my mind on that, that was it. A walkway down South Dogwood Trail is something that I feel is not a want, that's a need. That's a need for public health, safety, welfare. And if you talk with a lot of folks on with families, they agree with that. I find it very ironic that we find all these signs in town that says walk and bike to school. And most parents that I know out here would not let their kids walk or bike to school, especially along South Dogwood.
Jerry?
Well, we had a task force come back with a plan, and they recommended that we do a walking path, and I believe on South Dogwood as well as East Dogwood. I believe that we need to have a safe place for the children going to school and people going to the beach to walk and bike and so forth. By the way, I've gotten out and measured the walking path on Route 12, and it's not 8 or 10 feet, it's 5 feet. One of the things that we have to look at is we have to look at this project along with all the other projects and our budget. So we need to prioritize them and decide when the appropriate time is to do them. A number of people actually got up and talked in the meeting when they had on that Dogwood Trail walking path. And I heard from a number of people that the real priority is South Dogwood, not East Dogwood. So, and the right time to do anything with South Dogwood, by the way, will be when we get to the point where we're going to work on that road. And that's scheduled out, if you look at the current plan, about 3 years from now.
Gary?
Good answers. I'm not going to repeat some of the things that both Jim and Jerry said. We did have public input back in 2005, and we've had a task force in 2015, and in 2017, that task force made a recommendation favoring a walking path. My personal feelings on this is I am in favor of protecting the safety and the welfare of our residents using Dogwood Trail for walking, running, and biking. How that is accomplished, we still have not decided yet. And the council, our council needs to explore all options to maintain that public safety. Thank you.
Tom?
Hey, all good comments, all good constructive thought. I think the approach to South Dogwood is the approach that says we've got to do something with the street and the safety and the path. How do we make that work? And one suggestion that was made, we widen the street to 24 feet. Well, that would probably allow bikers and pedestrians to coexist if they were real careful. Maybe we need to keep the street a little bit narrower, like 22 feet, and find someplace else for the path. Can we make the path work on the east side of that street without impacting people's properties, if in some cases with easements, because it would be a very difficult terrain to work in? Or do we look for an alternative route for that path? I've discussed with our town engineer about 2 years ago the possibility of taking that path, the existing path, and extending it, but going behind the cemetery. In other words, pick up around Duckwoods Country Club and cut across there behind the cemetery and parallel the Duckwoods Country Club property and the property of the homeowners on East Dogwood with an easement from both sources, and run a path from there up to Fairway Drive. Once you get to Fairway Drive, you cut back over onto South Dogwood and go to the East Dogwood intersection and create your bike path there, or your multi-use path, or your walking path to tie into East Dogwood and go back on down to the beach. That might be a solution where we wouldn't have to widen the street as much and not have to also impact the safety of the bikers and walkers. I do think, going back one step, that we need to look at the total picture with South Dogwood, not just try to address one issue at a time. And that's on the schedule, I hope, for within 3 years. Thank you.
Are there questions people are writing and sitting on or not passing? Yes? Okay.
Hello, my name is Sherry Davenport, I happen to be a visitor to Southern Shores, but I am an Outer Banks native for many, many generations. I'm also the head of the Outer Banks chapter of the North Carolina Women for Cannabis. The city of Asheville and Buncombe County have both signed a letter of support for medical cannabis in North Carolina. Would you support a similar letter of support for Southern Shores and for Dare County? Thank you.
That's for everyone?
Yes, everyone.
Okay. Well, let's start with Gary McDonald.
Where's Ms. Davenport? She said medical use, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
She did.
Okay. You know, that's personal to me because I lost my father and my father-in-law to cancer. And I'll tell you this, I would have done anything to relieve their pain. So I'm conflicted because I'm an educator and I've seen what addiction does to our students and to our grown population. It's a very serious issue today, the opioid epidemic that's hitting. But for medical use, I could support that.
Jim?
My gut feeling tells me that this is a question best asked for the state as opposed to individual towns. That I think that whatever's decided on reefer ought to be done at a state level.
Jerry?
I've been doing some thinking about the issue. I had a close friend that also had terminal cancer, and fortunately, they were able to get cannabis in a pill form, and it really did improve the quality at the end of life. There are also a lot of good medical uses for it. I've got glaucoma. I think they prescribe it for glaucoma. But more importantly, there are a lot of young people out there that have epilepsy, and if you read the article in the Virginia Pilot last week, that's one of the areas where they're experimenting with oil to see if they can reduce the seizures. And that article sort of indicated it could go either way. On the other side, you have the whole concern that Dare County has a prescription drug problem. And so putting that on the prescription drug list, I'm conflicted because it could also lead to getting it out in the hands of children and causing another addiction. So I think the council should take a look at it. They're asking for our support and maybe writing a letter. I agree, that decision is going to have to be made at the state level. And a lot of the states, by the way, have been doing these through referendums back to the voters. It needs to be decided by the voters.
Tom?
I agree with what's been said. I think when you look at the opioid issues that we're dealing with throughout the country, medical marijuana may be a life-saving solution to pain treatment. I have among my own siblings, I have some history there of not very good results with somebody who got on marijuana at an early age and went on to a little bit harder things, alcohol and other drugs. And it's wasted one person's life, which I think about that when I think about drugs in any form. But I would support the medical use of it, yes, to make it just uncomplicated. Thank you.
Will Sam Williams come up?
I think so too, but that's the kind of thing you're going to get.
And Audrey Esposito?
Hello again. Southern Shores is a town of volunteers. It's getting harder and harder to get volunteers to serve on town boards and committees. What would you do to encourage citizens to volunteer? And this is a question for all candidates.
Jim?
Well, I've kind of answered that already. I think we're at that point where we need to really try and seek out and try and encourage folks to volunteer on these committees, boards, and what other avenues. I think we're really shooting ourselves in the foot when we just sit back and maybe advertise when we need somebody for the planning board, for example. We need to be proactively out there looking for them. I would also like to say that Southern Shores is known as a town of volunteers, as has been pointed out. It's all kind of people working together to make our community work. And their contributions and value just can't be overstated. But again, to the root answer, let's get out there and find them. Let's get out there and contact the younger crowd.
Tom?
I've been a boat club member for almost 30 years. I've been a member of the Civic Association and on their board for 2 years, for about a year after that in the volunteer capacity with the Civic Association, supervising some construction work for them. Our boat club has been a viable organization for the past 25 of those years. And right now, I can't find somebody to take the Commodore's job or take any job. And this is not a hard job. This is fun. And there are boat owners and not boat owners, but it's just a fun thing to do. But I can't get people to do something that's fun. How do you get somebody to come to a planning board meeting? It's tough. It really is. And I don't know what the answer is. I have no idea. I'll go one step further. I talked to no less than 10 people to run for council this time. Just suggested they might want to consider it because of their qualifications, because of their interest, because of their enthusiasm. Jim spoke up and said, I'll do it. I'd love to do it. But that's one person out of I don't know how many. So I think it's a really serious issue. We have to our residents have to recognize that a big part of our town's functioning and functioning the way it should function as a community is to get a little more involved, just a little more involved. Take a place on the Civic Association board, get involved in some way with something that the boat club's doing, but find a way to put yourself out there and do something for the community. Maybe you work your way up to a town job, I don't know. But just something for y'all to think about. We need your help in the volunteer area. Thank you.
Jerry?
I have seen a reduction in volunteers. I think one of the things that hasn't been put on the table is that when we ask people to volunteer and give in their time and efforts, particularly when we put them on committees to study a project, then we need to follow through. Does anybody remember the Tree and Vegetation Committee? They worked really hard. And what did we do with their plan? We shelved it. If you keep doing things and don't take any action after the people put in their time and effort, you discourage volunteerism. But there are ways that we could look at getting people involved in the community, more involved in working together. And I'll go back to one of the things we used to do when we did the beach cleanup. We'd get out there and we would put little plastic eggs for the children to find at the crossovers. We celebrate at the end of the day with hot dogs served in the Southern Shores Civic Association parking lot. And if we start doing things like that and getting people out, they'll become more engaged and more willing to work for the community, within the community. Thank you.
Audrey?
Thank you. Audrey Esposito, Southern Shores. My question is for all of you. Why is it so important to have low taxes when there is very little other revenue in our town? And we cannot seem to provide the necessary improvements that we're talking about, and you're talking about long-term. And other towns in Dare seem to have many more issues than we do. And they seem to be moving along and getting things done. And this is after being at 3 other forums this week, so we can hear what's going, but that's my question. The question is, why is it so important to have the low taxes when there's very little other revenue?
Linda?
Gary, do you want to start?
No, I just didn't get the volunteer question.
Oh, sorry.
Just, I can be very
Way to
short
watch
on
them,
it.
though.
Ma'am?
Go ahead.
No, I just thought, one of the things you do is you feed them and you reward them, and I'm talking about the volunteers. One of the things we don't do is probably thank them, but I've always learned, working with the public for as long as I have, if you feed them, they will come. And if you open the door and invite them in, that's very important. You have to talk with those people you agree with, and you have to talk with those people that you disagree with. And you have to listen. That's the most important thing, is listen to both sides of it. And then form an opinion. We need to have more events in our community where we have those, and I was thinking about like the yard sale that we have at the Southern Shores up here at the marketplace, and the Throwdown Surf event that we just had. Those kinds of things get our community out, and maybe the town needs to set up a little table there and have people sign up as volunteers and that kind of thing. And that'll build trust back with our community. And that's the way that you build that volunteerism back into our town. So, I'm sorry,
Should we repeat the question, maybe? Sorry.
Okay, we'll try again. Why is it so important to have low taxes when there is very little other revenue in our community? And we cannot seem to provide the necessary improvements that you've been talking about this evening. Other towns in Dare have many more issues than we have. And I did say that I've been to forums this week and have been listening to a lot of their issues, many more than we have here in Southern Shores. So I'd like to know, why is it so important then to have low taxes?
Gary McDonald.
Because people don't want to pay taxes. I'm just being honest. We can raise the tax rate, but folks, a lot of our community, our community's different than some of our neighbors in that a lot of them are retirees. They have a set income, and if they're like me, we didn't get a big pay raise over the last 5 or 6 years each year from our retirement funds or our Social Security or whatever we are using to supplement our incomes. So, we have to look and make those really cost-efficient decisions. We have to plan better, and we need to look at what our needs really are. We had a surplus this year in our town budget. I think we put $500,000 back into our unassigned fund balance. That's money that's not being used that could be spent to do those projects. So right now, we're really not looking at a need to raise revenues as much as to better plan and utilize the funds that we have. And then if the need comes, you raise taxes, you don't get reelected. I'm hearing that, but it's everybody's talking about tax cuts in this nation. They're not talking about adding more to everyone.
Tom.
Thank you. We do have pretty significant income outside of our property taxes and taxes we collect from our residents. Almost very close to half of our total budget comes from outside sources, comes from Dare County with occupancy and sales tax. So that money, coupled with what we collect from our residents, gives us money to operate on pretty comfortably. We're not neglecting things we should be doing. We're just having to delay some of those things and not do them all at once. Talking specifically about street improvements just for a minute, because that's a big expense. That's $500,000 or more every year. We could raise the budget to allow us or allocate more funds to that particular item every year if we wanted to, and it wouldn't be any problem to do that, to increase the amount of money we want to spend. The problem we have is having people who will do that work for us in a timely way and get it done during the year we'd like to have it done. We don't have a multitude of people standing in line to repave roads. We have 2 contractors. And that's our biggest single item, the capital improvement item, is our roads and infrastructure. So, yeah, we can allocate more money to it, and we can budget to pay more or spend more, but is the work going to get done? That's a big issue. I don't think having the lowest tax rate on the Outer Banks is necessarily a feather in our cap, but I think it's important, and I think most of our residents appreciate that. I really do. I don't think anybody complains about, nobody has asked me in 4 years to raise my taxes. They haven't. I have not heard a single person say it. I've been looking for it, but I haven't heard it. Anyway, thank you.
Jerry?
Right now, we do have, we didn't spend all the money we have in our budget, but we've got a lot of big projects that are being put on the plate. A new fire station possibly, the roads, the road improvement program, a walking path, and that's not going to come cheap either. And then we have the whole issue we need to decide on what we want to do with long-term budget nourishment. And that's why I think it's important that we look at our taxes based on what our needs are and how we lay out our plan. And more importantly, that we go back to the public. You're the ones that should decide what we do. I'm a big proponent of input from the general public on what our projects should be and what our priorities should be. And want to make sure that you have an opportunity to be involved in the decision-making process as we put together our plans.
Jim?
I'll try not to be redundant and repeat some of the things that have been said up here, but I think one other thing is worth mentioning, and that is to the cost of living out here, both in Southern Shores and the Outer Banks. It's hard to attract professional level people to jobs, even in Southern Shores, because of the high cost of living we have out here. Raising our taxes would just add to that high cost. I think that if we raise our taxes 1 cent per $100 evaluation would generate about $135,000, just for general information. But I think also that eventually we're going to have to raise our taxes anyway, because you can't maintain the same amount of income, maintain our services. I mean, inflation costs and everything keep going up. There's probably going to be the point in the future where we have to, but I think we need to try and maintain that tax rate as low as we can for a lot of reasons. One of them is most people, like Mr. McDonald said, don't like taking their hard-earned money and paying it to somebody else. Now, yes, we get services out of that tax money, and that's what makes it palatable to us to fork over that money, but, I think I'm all for low taxes. I think it is something that we have in this town that we can be proud of, but we also don't have a lot of the expenses that a lot of our sister communities have. We don't have a Parks and Recreation Department to pay for. There's all kind of things here that we don't have to pay for.
Paid fire department. A paid fire department, right there.
Right, I was hesitant to say that, but yes, a paid fire department also.
Sam Williams?
You may have noticed that I like the limelight.
You should
And
have run
I'm
for
sure there's
council.
other folks out there with questions, and if you just hold up your hand, they'll give you a yellow card to write it on. My question is, if a long-term plan is developed, considering the workload and the cost of revising the plan, how should it be revised, and how should pop-up issues be included? And in pop-up issues, I mean things like beach nourishment. If it had been it wasn't in a 5-year plan, and it pops up and all of a sudden you have to deal with it, or the recommendation by the task force on the walking path, all these sorts of things are going to happen year after year after year. So the basic question is, how often should it be revised, and how would you handle these pop-up issues? And it's a question for all candidates.
Jerry?
Well, I'd hope if we did a good job of planning, we'd have fewer pop-up issues. I've spent a lot of my life planning, and you can typically predict about 75 to 80% of what's going to happen, and then you're going to have things, what I see is things that we can't plan for, might be a hurricane, for example, like Matthew, where we've got to take money out of our emergency reserves. I see a plan as a living document. Once we lay out that plan, we should reevaluate it every year. And as new issues come up, like some of the pop-up projects you're talking about, they ought to be prioritized and laid out along with the other projects in the financial part of the plan. And that puts us in a better position, by the way, to see where our tax rates are going. And when we need to look for opportunities to reduce costs or look for all other areas for revenues, For example, walking paths. Good example is look for alternative sources of funding for a walking path. Thank you.
Tom?
Hey, thank you. Two things I think you can do, and I think Jerry's right. You have to have a certain amount of vision. There's no question about that. You can't just sit back and it's not going to happen. I think the first thing you do, you maintain a really healthy fund balance. You don't have just a few $100,000 over what you might need, but you try to carry $1 million and $1.5 million or maybe more money in your fund balance, and you absolutely have to operate, maybe for a whole year. And we do that. It's called management, but it's also called council, being on top of what our manager's doing. It's critical. Maintaining a healthy fund balance. And if you have a situation like we had with our small beach nourishment project, if we had to go ahead and implement that and the county had not been willing to help us, and we still had dedicated ourselves to do it, you borrow the money. You borrow the money and advertise it over 3 years or 5 years and pay it back without raising taxes, or raising taxes minimally if you have to. We did that with our second phase of our Canal Dredge project. We had a $1.3 million project. We didn't want to take that money from our fund balance or increase taxes. And after debating this and studying it, we realized we could borrow the money at a very, very low rate, less than 2.5%, and it was a very effective way for us to handle that expense. We were able to pay that money back in a shorter period of time and save the interest charges on that money. So there's ways you can approach this at the town level where you have some leverage and get past these humps, things you hadn't planned for, anticipated for. Thank you.
Jim?
Well, here I go again, back to my opening statement, because when I mentioned the long-range planning, I mentioned in there that it should be a living, breathing document and updated on an annual basis so that we can stay on top of things. Otherwise, a lot of long-range plans are prepared and then just go on a shelf and they're never followed through or even looked at again. But if we pull that thing out and adhere to it on a year-to-year basis and then update it, I think that will go a long way. I'm also, a big fan of trying to anticipate brainstorming what might we get hit with. We all know we're going to get hit with hurricanes, if not to, this year, then next year. So we know that we need to be budgeting for that. There's also a lot of other things that are a little kind of off the wall that we can anticipate, and that is, for example, new regulations and requirements coming down from FEMA and National Fire Protection folks. I think sometimes those kind of requirements and minimum standards can cost a lot of money for a municipality. What I'm talking about sometimes is like emergency communications equipment for in case of disaster. Those things aren't cheap. There's all kind of things that we could maybe try and anticipate coming down the road to include in that yearly update. But bottom line is yearly updates are critical.
Gary?
You plan for your priorities. Set those priorities you want to achieve and how you want to get there, and you plan for them. Not only your current needs, but you try to project out what you're going to need in the future. And, our roads are the best example. We've got about 15 years worth of road issues that we need to correct. You got to revisit that every year. You have to do it annually, and you may have to do it even quicker than that. Emergencies are going to happen. We live on the Outer Banks. We have named storms that come by us every year. Sometimes they visit, sometimes they go by. So we build our undesignated fund balance to a point that we can handle those emergencies. And if something arises, like you need a new HVAC system or a new roof on a building, you can say, okay, we're going to have to take that out of the undesignated fund balance. The other thing is, money's cheap right now. You can finance projects and pay for it. We have the monies in our budget that we could finance out, and I'm not advocating this, Sam, but we could finance out road projects right now at a very low interest rate. And within our budget, pay for those without raising taxes in this town. So there's ways to do that, and we just have to explore all avenues that are available to us. And, right now, we have a lot of opportunities to get monies. Thank you.
Would Dana Falado come for a question? Yes.
I'm Dana Falardo. I live over on 12th Avenue and Duck Road, where it floods all the time. And my question is for Jim Connors. Well, all of you, actually, because everybody was giggling about the taxes. Our taxes did in fact go up. It was revenue neutral. You lowered the values of our properties. So when we say we didn't increase taxes, that's a misnomer because we lowered the property values. Now, for some of you, it may not make a difference. I mean, our house is going to be our final resting place. But if you try to refinance, if you try to reverse mortgage, if you try to sell it and downsize from the larger house that you had, you're taking a beating. The question here is, what happens when those emergencies do come up and you're not planning out and doing a strategic plan and a tactical plan very clearly and not having enough money? Are the property values going to go up, or are you going to raise taxes?
I think you asked that first.
I understand that question.
Jim?
No, everybody, actually.
Well, that question was originally directed to me, but I'm not sure I understood what the question was.
The question is, well, first of all, I wanted to correct what was said, and everybody's laughing. Nobody wants higher taxes. No, nobody likes to pay more money.
Well,
But at the expense of our roads not being done and not having a strategic plan and a tactical plan, 12th Avenue, 11th Avenue, the beach area is not being touched at all. And my question is, now that you have these projects that can't wait, they're really crumbling, are you going to raise taxes again, or are you going to raise property values? But you have raised taxes.
If that question was addressed to me, I would say I haven't raised any taxes.
I didn't mean you, I'm sorry. Everybody.
I'm still a little confused at the question, though, but if I'm understanding it right, it goes right back to what we've been talking about, a long-range plan, looking out toward the future and everything. I'm not an advocate of raising taxes by any means. I would have to pay them. There's something ingrained into me that doesn't like paying taxes on, based on my labors and everything, but did that answer your question?
No. No, because you're saying you didn't raise taxes. However, you did to the disservice of the people who own property in town, and realtors, and people trying to refinance and all. So, with these pending projects or impending emergencies that we're talking about throughout this program, what's going to happen? We do have to pay for them somehow. Which way are you going to choose? Are you going to choose raising taxes or raising property values? Because right now the property values are killing a lot of people who are trying to downsize and perhaps sell their larger properties and so forth.
Is that clear? This question?
A little more.
Yeah.
I think Tom addressed this. We've got revenue from other sources. We've been talking about planning so that we can anticipate these costs. There's always going to be unanticipated events that happen or that pop up, and that's why we maintain a reserve balance in our, that's why we maintain a reserve balance.
Tom?
I'm sorry, that's the best I can try
Yeah.
and
Okay.
figure out here.
I had this conversation with 4 or 5 people in last week, a very similar conversation. 2 of them were non-resident property owners. Your property, your dwelling or your home was reevaluated or reassessed by the county 4, 5, 6 years ago. The state law mandates that if a property is reevaluated and it loses value on the books, then the local jurisdiction has to increase the tax rate on that property in order to remain revenue neutral. And the reason for that is because the services and the things we provide as far as public safety and so forth, those costs don't go down. I can't go out and renegotiate with my trash contractor to come back for $50 a month cheaper. He's not going to do that. So recognizing that municipalities have to provide the same services, the state mandates that you have a revenue neutral tax base. And that's why your tax bill went up, some cases, quite a lot when the property was revalued. We don't control that. We don't manage that or control that. All we can do is do what we have to do to maintain a revenue neutral tax level. I can't speak to your loss of property value and how long it may take you to recover that loss in property value. I have no way of knowing. The assessments take place every 8 years, I believe that's right. So you could expect to see a change in that in a couple more years, but right now it's locked in. I don't know what you do in your case to really solve that problem.
I apologize. I was the one who came up there and spoke about why is there such a big deal about taxes. We know we have these issues, and they're not getting addressed now because of lack of planning. And taxes should be going up. Instead, everybody was happy with the fact, oh, well, taxes didn't go up, so I'm happy, I'm excited. Taxes did go up, and at some point, we're going to have to make an adjustment.
This sounds like a long discussion for maybe not this panel right now. Gary, did you want to comment?
Yes. That's why I want to speed up the process and plan of fixing our infrastructure. It maintains our property values better than it should, better than it does now. And I push for an increase in the capital improvement plan this year, or the funds for that, to improve those roads. Because when they go, if you got bad roads, your property, people look at that when they come to buy. The other thing is, our taxes did go up this year. Dare County's increasing our taxes 4 cents. So we have to pay that. We pay town taxes in addition to Dare County. And what Tom said about the increase in the property values, that's done by the county, and it has to be done every so many years. But we also have another fund, which is our occupancy tax. And in Dare County, we've been very fortunate. Our occupancy tax has increased for the last 5 years. Every year it's gone up. This year I think the projection is somewhere like 8%. Don't know what those funds will mean to us, but hopefully that will maintain our services, and we won't have to raise personal property tax in the town of Southern Shores to provide those services. But that's what I want. What I want is a plan to fix those roads and to fix our infrastructure so that we can maintain our properties. And also, one of the things that I pushed for was to maintain our community as a private residential community. That in itself makes us unique here in Southern Shores. We're a residential community. You go to Kill Devil Hills and you have huge structures and hotels on the beachfront. We have none of those in our town. And we have size limits on the houses that can be built. So that's what I would push for, is to maintain that quaint residential type community that we have, and that maintains I think our property values.
Jerry.
Okay, a lot has been said. Are we doing a good job of getting things done, and do we need to increase our taxes? I think I heard that we actually had $500,000 that we put back into the budget. Does that mean our taxes should be lowered? Not necessarily. We need to do a better job of planning, laying out the projects that we need to be doing and putting them on a timetable. If we do that, we'll have a better picture of where we're headed and what it's going to cost us. And of course, we need to have buy-in to the community before we do anything. Thank you.
Tommy Carroll, this may be the last question.
Tommy Carroll, Southern Shores. Tom Bennett, you voted against a proposal to limit the size of the residential houses in Southern Shores, a restriction that was favored by the overwhelming number of town residents. Later, you supported a zoning amendment regarding lot coverage that would also make it easier to enlarge houses. Why did you go against the wish of the majority of the citizens in your vote, and what's your justification for doing so?
I wasn't aware of the fact I went against the majority of the citizens when I voted that way, but I'll tell you why I voted that way.
That was just based on the people in the meeting at the time.
Maybe in the
as well.
meeting that night, yes, that's fine. I'm glad you clarified that. We decided, council decided, I voted against the idea of reducing the resident size to 6,000 square feet. There were a number of reasons I didn't vote and did not favor that, and the first one was the old adage of individual property rights. I think they're very important. The second reason was that we already had provisions on the books to control home size based on lot coverage and setbacks. If you have a certain size lot and you are allowed to cover 30% of that lot with a structure and associated improvements, you should be allowed to do that. If it happens that you can build a 5,000 square foot house or a 7,000 square foot house, as long as it complies with the building code, you should be allowed to do it. That's my thought. I didn't object to I felt we also had, going back one step, we also had pretty strict guidelines as far as occupancy, how many people you can have in that house. And what triggered this whole conversation about the house size was the mega house or the event house that was proposed being built on Highway 12 by a local developer. That kind of morphed from preventing an event house into reducing house size to reduce occupancy. The builders I talked to tell me you can build a 6,000 square foot house with 10 bedrooms without too much trouble. That's 20 folks coming to stay at that house on a weekly basis. So I don't think we accomplished a great deal by dropping the maximum size of a home down to 6,000 square feet. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Tommy.
See, Jerry, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would like the other candidates.
Okay.
Okay. We actually did have input that said our property owners and residents did not want to increase lot coverage or home size. That was done in this survey that was done as a part of the town code rewrite. The number that we had for not increasing lot coverage was 62% against it, and only about 30% in favor of it. And our planning board came back with a proposal to change its ETA that would, in effect, loosen the restrictions. For example, they were going to let you put in a 500 square foot swimming pool and not count it towards lot coverage. Thanks to Councilman Gary McDonald, he recommended making none of the changes. But actually, Mayor Bennett was one of the people that voted against he wanted to make the changes. So I just want to clear the record.
Gary?
I voted for that. I think we're a residential community, and that was the reason I voted to, or motioned that we go to a limit on house size. You can build it, but you can only build so big. And that stopped superstructures. What occurred there prior to my coming on council was the state made a change in how they regulate things and took local municipality authority away as far as monitoring the number of bedrooms you could have in a house. And that's what pushed that issue forward for us. Plus, we had people calling and saying that, you know, we don't want a mega house on the beach. But that happened in May. I don't know the exact dates, but that went before the state legislature in March. In May, it passed and was on the books June 1st. Kill Devil Hills has not addressed that issue. Duck and Nags Head addressed it that summer, like immediately in June, and both now have restricted covenants. The town of Southern Shores waited. I didn't come on the council until December of that year. And that was one of the first issues that we faced, and we moved forward on that very quickly to limit the size of houses so we wouldn't have those huge structures on our beachfront. Thank you.
Man, these mega homes have been at talk of the town for more than 20 years. We have gone through all kind of gymnastics trying to figure out ways of how to regulate the McMansions, so to speak. The town finally decided on some measures a few years ago, or 10, 12 years ago, to limit those house sizes after trying other avenues. But again, as Mr. McDonald pointed out, it was state legislative action that undercut not only our ordinance, but just about every other municipality's ordinance on the beach. Now, as far as limiting homes to 6,000 square feet, a lot of that was a lot of that was thanks to the efforts of Chris Nason, our councilman, who is an architect, and so he could look at this from many different avenues, many different perspectives. So, I think the 6,000 square foot limited is pretty good right now. I mean, to control that small town atmosphere, that small town ambiance, and not just that though, but try and limit the number of people that visited that house. So, anyway, there we go.
I have to correct that. Mr. Nason voted no on that issue when we voted on that.
Can I correct some other statements, erroneous statements that have been made here?
Well, it was Mr. Holland and Mr. Newberry and myself voted for.
I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing here, but I know that Chris Nason helped us get to where we are right now. But again, can I correct some
I don't think we're going to rehash everything.
Due to time constraints, I think that if anyone wants to stop and talk to you after the forum concludes, that would be absolutely fine. But I think we have to do our closing statements now. Sorry.
She's so diplomatic, I tell you. Okay, we will have the closing remarks, and I have to congratulate you all because I didn't see Linda stand up once. So, good deal. Okay, so reverse order. Jerry will go first, then Tom, then Gary, then Jim. 2 minutes.
Again, my thanks to the Dare League of Women Voters for sponsoring the event. And thanks to all of you who are out there who are listening and who posed questions to us so you could learn more about us. Right now, our town is faced with a number of issues that challenge our future. New fire station, beach nourishment, crumbling roads, and other infrastructure issues. I want to make sure that the direction we're heading is the right direction and that you, the public, support where we are going. How do we do this? By putting together a master plan that lays out our future for the next decade and backing it up with a financial plan that forecasts expenses, revenues, and taxes so we can see where we are all headed and what it's going to cost you, the taxpayer. And most importantly, making sure you all have an opportunity to have input into the decision-making process. After all, this is your town, and the money we spend are your tax dollars. I'd like to thank you for your time, and I hope you'll give me the opportunity to represent you next year by voting for me in the upcoming election.
Tom, yes?
Thank you. Excuse me. I believe in the importance of long-term planning, no question about that. However, I believe this planning must be done in a responsible way that does not create an unfair tax burden on our residents. Our town is required by state law to develop a comprehensive financial plan each year and adopt it as our budget. We develop a detailed budget, and like other towns and counties, we implement a capital improvement plan for each coming year. We have a very comprehensive capital improvement plan in place now, which has been in place for many years and projects out, as someone told me, about 15 years. Some of the future projects I would consider vital would include continue to rebuild our aging streets, to continue to address our stormwater issues, to support our volunteer fire department in their effort to build a new fire station to better serve the town's needs, to complete the update of our town code of ordinances, to continue to address the public safety issues on South and East Dogwood Trail, most important, work with NCDOT, our neighboring towns, to find a workable approach to help reduce our summer weekend traffic while being considerate of our residents and visitors. Finally, the job of the mayor is more than a title. Your mayor represents you, your values, your principles, your concerns, and your pride in your community. I have endeavored during my first term to do this as part of our obligation to the residents of Southern Shores. I was elected by you to do what I seem to be and what you tell me is in your best interest, and I've tried to do that. Under my leadership, and with the help of many, our town has had an outstanding 4 years. We're going in the right direction. Let's stay the course together. I ask for your support in the coming election, and I thank you once again for your support over these past 4 years. Thank you.
Gary?
Mr. Bennett stated that his vision for our town is to stay the course, a military term that means the pursuit of a goal regardless of obstacles or criticism. That all sounds good unless you're going in the wrong direction. When I think of his stay the course and what it means for our town, it means no planning, no foresight, slow and inadequate road repair, no plan for beach nourishment, continued use of our fund balance for piecemeal projects, little consideration for our community input. Given the current and future issues that we discussed tonight, stay the course sounds remiss and probably half-hearted. To continue to work in this manner demonstrates fiscal irresponsibility and the inability to compromise and a limited vision. Folks, we can't do business like that. As your mayor, I would work with council, the staff, and you to project ahead. I'm the person with the energy and the foresight to do this job. I appreciate your vote and thank you for your participation in this evening. Thank you to the league and all of you for coming.
Jim?
I don't agree that our town government is broken. I think we've got the lowest tax rate. We've got the most professional, courteous, and knowledgeable town staff that we've had in my 20-plus years here. So I think that staying the course is a very appropriate term in a lot of ways. That does not mean, though, that we can't improve things. My vision for the town, once again, is working together to get things done. We're not always going to agree on things, but I will always welcome from residents input, suggestions, and efforts to help maintain what is working well as input to help make things better. I'd like to bring my history of volunteerism, professional expertise, and experience, again, working with people to get things done, to maintain the quality of life we all enjoy here, as well as to improve things. At the end of the day, we're all neighbors here in this town, and we're all blessed to live here. We're living where we choose to live because we love it here. And working together, we can realize the visions that we all share, and we can accomplish those. Those visions being that small town atmosphere and ambiance. We've got an outstanding environment out here. We've got an excellent community of volunteers who get things done. So once again, I'd like to ask for y'all's vote so that I can help all of y'all get things done for our town.
This concludes the Southern Shores Voter Forum. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause. So we thank the candidates and thank you all for coming. Wait, I just have a couple of announcements to make. Also, thank you to Southern Shores for letting us use the meeting room. The last day to register to vote is this Friday, the 13th. Ugh. Early voting begins Thursday, October 19 at 2 locations. In Manteo at the Dare County Board of Elections, Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 5 until November 3rd. This will also be in the newspaper, I'm sure. Then Saturday, November 4, from 8:30 until 1. In KDH, you can early vote at the KDH Town Hall from Thursday, October 19 through Friday, November 3rd. And the hours there are 10 to 2, Monday through Friday. And of course, Election Day is Tuesday, November 7. We encourage you to join the League as we strive to make democracy work. Membership applications are in the back of the room. We like men too, so don't be shy. Thank you very much for coming.